Welcome to another Friday. I'm so excited that you're here with us today. I am here in very snowy Chicago, and I know some of you can relate to that right now, but as David mentioned, who knows what's going to happen in 2020? Every day is weirdly the same and totally different is my experience. So I hope you're all hanging in there. And I really appreciate you joining us today because it really is this is all new territory for all of us. And so my goal here is to share some value and hopefully give you some ideas to move forward on behalf of your customers. And then if you have questions, I hope I can answer them well, but you guys always do. So thanks for that. So first of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeannie. It's nice to meet you. I'm Jeannie Walters. I have a company called Experience Investigators. We consult, we journey map. We also do a lot of training, workshops, and speaking. And so these are all the different ways to find me, to ask questions, to reach out. We have a 21-day challenge that you can text experience to the number 66866. And then that will sign you up for that 21-day challenge just to help you think about customer experience every day for 21 days and little ideas to move that forward. So feel free to take advantage of that. But I'm pleased that you're all here. I think it's great to connect in times like this. So thank you for being here, not just because of showing up for yourself, not just for showing up for me, but really you're here for your team and your customers. And that is really meaningful. And so I don't want to lose sight of that any of these weeks that we've been doing this. It's meant a lot to me that you care enough about your team and your customers to show up, to learn more, to put things into action, to really move you forward. So today we have a lot to go through. What this is based on is a blog that I put out this week about how to use journey maps during this time. Journey mapping is a big topic. It's something that we can dive into a lot of different ways. My goal today is to give you some ideas to move forward. And if you have questions, if you want deeper dives, feel free to, ask for that, to set up some time with me. I'm happy to do that. So let's get started. So these are the 10 this is what we're going to do today. First, we're going to go over this using journey maps. Then we're going to have the Ask Me Anything session. You guys have been asking great questions, so I look forward to that. And then one of the things that we're trying to do is really respond to you for what you want to see for the webinars. What do you want to see me blog about? Let me know what would be valuable to you, and we'll put that into the future schedule. So first of all, let's just talk about the new normal. COVID-19 and the resulting new normal it's making everything a little different. Our plans for 2020 are kind of out the window. And what we're learning is that we have to adapt in ways that we did not expect, none of us expected, and we have to adapt on behalf of how our customers didn't expect to have to adapt as well. And so this is, we're calling it the new normal because we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know what we can predict. But there are certain points where we have to really look at this as an opportunity to serve our customers when they really, really need us. Our customers today need us. They need us to stand up for them. They need us to look at what are the best ways we can serve them today. And so sometimes what that means is when we have that short-term urgent feeling, it's easy to kind of put everything else on ice, all of those long-term plans. So maybe you were in the middle of a journey mapping program, maybe you started one, maybe you have a really robust program, you've got lots of journey maps, but everybody's kind of saying, we can't even think about that right now. And what I want to encourage you to do is think, okay, how can we use journey maps the way they are intended, which is a tool? We often make the mistake of looking at journey maps as something that is done. We check it off our list. Now is the time to leverage the tool in your toolkit and use this journey map. And if you have never created one before, use this time to create the ones that you can. And that's what we'll be walking through today. So it is one of the most powerful tools in your toolkit. It is something that you can leverage right now to really identify those pain points for your customers and address them head on. So it's a terrific time to actually make a journey map, even though you might not be able to physically get together with your team or with your customers. We're going to talk about all of those things. So in the blog post, I went through 10 different ways that you can build journey maps today. And so those ideas are, whoops, did I skip a slide here? Sorry, everybody. So first things first, you've got to know your goals. You have to absolutely understand, why are you doing this? You also have to know what you're mapping, what journey you're really going to look at, zero in on. You have to know your customer. And sometimes we think we know our customer, but then when we start mapping, we realize, oh my gosh, we are talking about 10 different types of customers. We really need to zero in on who is our customer right now. We also need to evolve our approach. There are times where it makes perfect sense to get everybody in a room and use the Post-its and have a great session, but now is not that time. We just can't physically do that. So what can we do? We have to evolve with how we do this. Part of that includes workshop virtually. That is a great resource right now, and I'll talk about that. The other thing is we want to involve our customers. Sometimes with journey mapping, we make the mistake of never really including our customers. That sounds so incredibly simple, but it actually is the truth. I've seen many, many organizations who look at journey mapping as an inside-out approach. They actually are creating internal process maps and not really journey maps for their customers from their customers' perspective. So be really aware of how can you include your customers? How can you really involve them in this? And then, of course, we want to synthesize all the information and the insights that we've found. And that is something that in the past, I think in the regular normal, sometimes we would spend a lot of time doing that. We would be gathering so much data from all these different data points that it would take a while to really synthesize all that. We might have to move a lot faster than that in today's world. So look for ways that you can really do that kind of quickly, ways that you can really address that. And we'll talk about that as well. And then you want to produce a journey map template, I call it, because hopefully this is something that you use in many different ways. You want to use it for different customers, different journeys, different situations. So produce a template that works for your organization. And there are so many options on how to journey map and what a journey map looks like at the end. It's really easy to get enamored with the idea of a beautiful journey map. There are lots of different ways to produce a journey map. Some of them are prettier than others, but as long as it's useful for your organization, that's the most important thing. And then, of course, you want to share that journey map and prioritize those improvements and those ideas that you found through the active journey mapping. And then last but not least, and hopefully throughout the process of journey mapping, you want to take action. And this is another thing that sometimes customer experience people are told, don't worry about this, little lady. You can just gather up those insights and let everybody else worry about prioritizing and taking action on that. The best journey maps are used as continuous tools to improve the action, to improve the experience, and then go back and map and figure out, did we deliver on those improvements that we promised? Are customers happy? So it's a great cycle that you can get into when done well. So let's talk about the first thing here. What are your goals? Well, when you look at overall, why do we journey map? Sometimes I've asked this question to leaders. I've said, why do you want a journey map? And they'll say, well, we read a book and heard it's really good. It's a good way to understand our customers. Okay, great. What will understanding your customers do? How will you actually improve the business? How will you respond to your customers? You really have to think through, why are we doing this? Because if you can identify the goals of, we want to reduce the pain points for our customers, because we know that we're creating too much friction for them. We know that there's too much effort that our customers are taking, and it's frustrating for them. And that leads to lower renewal rates. That leads to a higher churn rate than we like. That leads to more calls coming into our contact center. And if we could really identify some of those big business goals that would tie back to what would happen if we made these improvements, that's where you want to start. You want to make sure you understand what are the goals of this initiative. Because I will tell you something, once you start journey mapping, it can become a little addictive, where you're finding all these amazing insights, and you find all these ways that you want to improve the experience for your customers. And it can feel really good, because it's like you're picking up the rock and you're finding all the little things that live under that rock that you didn't even know were there. And so that can be really powerful, but that only works if you know what the goals are, because it's really easy then to have this huge list of improvements you want to make and not really understand, how should we prioritize these? What will this do for our business? How can we get our leadership to invest in these improvements? It's not enough to just say, well, we want to make our customers happy. We have to make sure we're connecting the dots to what that means for the business. Know what you're mapping. Again, sounds pretty straightforward, But a lot of times people think we have to do an end-to-end journey map. We have to figure out every single touch point that our customers are dealing with. And I love end-to-end journeys. I really do. I think they're so powerful. But right now might not be the time to take that on. So maybe right now is about one specific area of the journey that you know is a challenge for your customers, that you know is not working in today's environment, that you know is an issue. And so, for instance, you might have a group of people who are going to be financially affected by the situation we're in. You might know that about your customers. So where are the points where that might cause issues in your organization, in your customer journey? So for instance, if there are certain renewals that are coming up, could you offer something that would ease that for them? Could you offer a discount for renewing early? Could you offer a few extra months of your subscription? Just thinking through those things. Where is that part of the journey that you can really zero in on and make changes on behalf of your customer? Some of you will take on those end-to-end journeys, and that is great, and I encourage you to do that. But when you do that, you have to understand what that means. And that means not just starting at post-purchase. I'm a big believer the customer experience starts before they're a prospect, and it goes all the way through to when they leave you and beyond, because then they already have an opinion and a perception of what it was like to be your customer that they're going to share with others. So when you talk about end-to-end journeys, make sure you're actually talking about end-to-end. I've seen things where people say, yeah, we did an end-to-end journey map, and then they show me and it's actually post-purchase, and it only goes through that first year of being a customer. Well, that's not an end-to-end journey to the customer. That might be how you're defining it. That's not to the customer. Everything that you're mapping, everything that you're doing when you're journey mapping should be about the customer's perception, the customer's point of view, that lens of the customer. What is the actual experience they're having? Because that's the value that mapping brings to us. It's not about what we perceive from the inside out. It's about really understanding, okay, we know our processes work like this. Well, what if the customer doesn't think they work that well? What if we hand customers off in really awkward ways because that's how our org chart is set up? Well, those are the types of things that we want to find when we're journey mapping. What is their perception, their perspective? So make sure everything you're mapping is from that customer's perspective. And know your customer. Sorry, I've got trigger finger today. It's a little twitchy. So the other thing is know your customer. And this one is, again, something that seems so obvious, but a lot of times when I've seen journey mapping start, they talk about, we're going to do this for all of our customers. And then you start looking and there are many, many different types of customers. This can be especially true with B2B. So what I would encourage you to do is if you're taking on journey mapping and you know your goal, you know that you want to do something that will reduce the number of service calls, for instance. Maybe that's one of your big goals. Well, look at who is making the majority of those service calls. What persona can represent those customers for you when you're tackling this journey map? Look for those things. The other opportunity today is to look at who are the customers who will be most impacted, who are the ones that have the most concerns around the time that we're in. Maybe that is your group of customers that is over the age of 60. Maybe it's a certain group of business customers that you know will be affected financially by this situation that we're all in. So look for those opportunities to really know your customers. And I also like to stress here, a lot of times when I ask about personas, which are those fictionalized ways that we represent our customer, a real, it looks like a real person when we create a persona. Sometimes we only focus on how that persona is interacting with our brand specifically. I encourage you to think bigger. Think about this person as a whole person and go one step further today and think about the situation that they're in today. For example, many of us have children at home now who are e-learning. Many people, many professionals are now part-time teachers at home. How does that affect their whole life? How does that affect what they're willing to do with your brand? So instead of just zeroing in on this is the problem we're solving and this is what our customers want from us, think about your whole customer right now and how can you better serve them? How can you really look at this journey map as a way to really identify with them and deliver what they really need today? And then reach out and make sure that you're representing them in the best way. But really think about who is your customer right now. And we also have to evolve our approach. And this is because a lot of times when we talk about journey mapping, it's kind of in its own bucket. We talk about it as this thing, this tool that we have over here, and then we have the voice of the customer program over here, and that's where we get all the customer feedback and data. And sometimes those things intersect, but maybe not as much as they should. I've heard that. I've also heard we have so much data, we don't know what to do. We can't even make heads or tails of it. Or sometimes I say, what kind of feedback do you get from customers? What kind of voice of the customer program do you have? And they say, oh, I don't even know what that is. We don't have any data about our customers. So there's this huge swing between not having enough data and having way too much, and how we incorporate that into what we're doing with mapping. And what I would encourage you to do is, first of all, again, go back to your goals. What are you trying to do? Go back to who your customer is, and then look for the data that matters to them. And sometimes if you have no data, you have to get creative. There are ways that you can find out, for instance, maybe you have user groups online that aren't branded, but that's where people are talking about your brand. Maybe social media is where they're giving you some feedback. Go talk to your contact center reps and say, what are we hearing from this group? What are you seeing as points of friction for them? Where should we really zero in on this? So look for ways to kind of get creative with your approach right now, because if you have too much data to dig through, one thing I would encourage you to consider in this moment in time is that there's a blog I wrote years ago called Data is Great, but It's Always Late, because data only tells you what's reported. So it's happened in the past. So if you're looking at your data from the last 6 months, that might not be representative for where we're going in the next 6 months and where your customers are going in the next 6 months. So get creative right now. Look for those moments that matter to them based on what you're seeing in these last few weeks, based on what you predict will happen in the market and with your brand, and really look for those ways to include the data that matters, but don't get overwhelmed with this. So this is about making action. This is about improving the experience. This is about responding to your customers in their times of need. And so that's why when we talk about evolving your approach, a lot of that is around selecting the right data and not getting too overwhelmed. And, I've heard a lot of requests lately for, what do we do? We were supposed to have a journey mapping workshop and we can't get together and our office is closed, and what do we do? And I love journey mapping workshops. I do. I love them. There's so much power about being in that room together. There is a lot of aha moments. There are a lot of aha moments where we look at each other and we say, oh my gosh, wouldn't that be amazing if we could do that for our customers? And you see the light bulbs. I absolutely love facilitating those. That's one of my favorite things that I do. And so when we think about virtual workshops, we have to reframe a little bit. I think it's very, very possible to get to the same level of insights with virtual workshops, but you have to handle them a little differently. There are some great tools out there. I mentioned in the blog, Mural is a whiteboarding tool that I use that can be really great. CX Workout is great, and UXpressia, I hope I'm saying that right. All of those things can be used to really help you in this moment. But one of the ways that I want to stress to you that virtual is different than in person. In person, you can kind of respond to the energy in the room. You can make some decisions based on, we haven't had a break for a while. I'm going to put a break in here, let people stretch their legs. I like the way these two are talking to each other. I'm going to set them off into a separate room to solve a problem. There are tools now that you can do that virtually. So Zoom is a great tool. That's what we're on right now, where you can actually have breakout rooms. You can send people to breakout rooms. You can do really creative things there. And so virtually, we have the tools now where we can do a lot of what we did in person. One of the challenges that I've seen with virtual is that if you don't set the right expectations, and if you don't really plan and prepare for virtual in almost a more robust way than you do for in-person, it can be really easy for people to kind of phone it in. And what you really want is everybody to be engaged. So I would stress that when you look at how you're going to run your workshop, you really ask people specifically. You say, hey, Joe, who is in charge of sales, I'm going to really need you in that hour between 10 and 11 because we're going to be talking about sales. So in fact, would you send me in advance some of your thoughts on this? Get them engaged early. Get them engaged so that they know that they're a crucial part of this, so they're not just sitting there and becoming Zoom zombies, which is a thing now. So be aware of that. Be aware of breaks. Really important, because otherwise people will just take them. So make sure that you acknowledge this is the schedule moving forward. We're going to take a lunch break. We're going to do this, whatever. But make sure you're really setting those expectations for virtual workshops, because that's the only way it's really going to be effective. Involve customers. We have to do this for journey mapping, right? Like, this is a critical part of what we do. How can we do that if we can't, camp out and observe them in a store? How can we do that in today's world? And again, we have so many great tools. I love customer interviews. You can still do that over video chat like this. You can record it. You can do all sorts of things. So one of the ways is to really include customers through that customer interview process. The other is there are things, I love the idea of virtual focus groups. CX Workout has a great option for this. And essentially what you do is you gather people and virtually, but they don't necessarily see everybody or see or hear the answers all at once like you would in a focus group. So instead, it leverages AI. It does all sorts of cool stuff to really help you get to what are their concerns really about. Virtual focus groups, amazing. You can also use things like communities and different ways to have a message board or things like that. We have so many different options around this now. It's just important we don't skip this step. It's really easy to do right now. And in some cases, I know that I like to say, perfect is the enemy of done. And so sometimes you just want to get something out the door and test it. I totally understand that. What I'm saying here is make sure that even after you put it out there, include your customers, get feedback, get real-time feedback from them if possible, get their actual words, make sure you're telling their story in their words. And so the reason I like customer interviewing is because you can take some of those quotes, bring that back to leadership and say, this is either working or not. Storytelling can be very powerful right now, even more than the data. So make sure you're kind of walking those two lines of collecting enough data and real feedback, but also telling a story that can be based on anecdotal feedback. That's okay, but it helps you tell the story that the customers want you to tell. And then we've got to synthesize all this information and insights. And so when you look at all the different things that we've collected, when we look at all the different ways that we have customer data, we need to really figure out how does all of this weave together to tell that story to meet that goal that we have from the beginning. So when I think about different points of customer data, I think about customer feedback, customer behaviors and actions, and then systems, procedures, processes, and touch points. So when you're looking at your information, make sure you're touching on all of those things. Make sure you have something representing all of those things. Because if you're only talking, for instance, about customer behavior, that might be a great place to start. But again, you have to know, how does that tie back to the goals that we have? How does that affect the touch points that they're interacting with? And how do we make the changes on behalf of them that will actually improve the experience for them? Not just say, yeah, it's going to be a little better. We have to really zero in on what does that actually mean? How can we improve the experience to improve the outcomes for us as a business? And also to tie that back to, how can we measure this? How can we make sure that we're actually improving this on behalf of the customer? So all of those things are really important. And then all these different ways that we have to produce journey maps now, that you can journey map in so many different ways. And one of the things I hear a lot in what I do is I come in and they say, oh my gosh, we're so excited you're here because I went on Google Images and I saw some of the journey maps that are out there and they're so cool. And it's like, yeah, they are. They're really cool, but they're a page and they don't really necessarily tell the whole story. They might be a really great graphic design. They might be representative of one persona in one moment in time. Great. But I think people sometimes get caught up in this idea of we have to have this perfect, beautiful one-page journey map that tells the story. And that's not really going to tell the story that you need right now. So I encourage you to look at this as what will work for our organization. what will really speak to the people in our organization so that they can internalize this and then turn that into action on behalf of your customers. So I've seen everything from spreadsheets, yes, spreadsheets, to really robust, amazing interactive tools, CX Workout, which I mentioned, some other ones that are really powerful out there. I've seen, people use things like PowerPoint and Google Slides to get it done. And I'm not endorsing that necessarily, but what I'm saying is this is about the action that you're taking. So don't get too hung up in trying to make something perfectly beautiful right now. Get hung up in using this as a tool. Make sure that you're sharing, that you're really looking at something that will work throughout your organization. Speaking of sharing, we need to share this. We need to prioritize the actions next. We need to make sure that we are in alignment with our leadership on, okay, how do we prioritize this? There will be some short-term, easy wins for you once you start journey mapping. Look for those because everybody loves a win. And so look for ways that you can adapt and make change on behalf of your customers, and then measure that, make sure you're actually improving that your customers see that as an improvement. But if you can collect those quick wins, that's a really good way to start. But you're going to have longer term things that seem a little like, I don't know if this is worth it. This is going to take a lot of resource. This is going to take a lot of buy-in from our leadership, a big investment of time and resources. And then what? How do we get there, improvement and make sure that we're actually doing this in a way that will improve things long-term for our customers. So when you look at priorities, make sure that you're in alignment with how are we deciding this? And there are a couple of things I always lean on for this. One is, again, what was your goal to begin with? If your goal around journey mapping was to reduce the costs of service. So let's say you want to reduce the number of calls you have coming into your contact center, and you want to make sure that you're limiting the number of refunds and things like that are going out. If that's your goal, that helps you prioritize then, because then you can find those improvements that will tie back to that goal. The other thing is, if you're looking at customer feedback, which I encourage you to do, and your different data points like Net Promoter Score, and you say, we want to improve NPS, that's one of our goals, then look for those points that really matter to the customer and look for how can we improve the points so that when we try NPS again, our numbers go up. So it's all about tying to those goals, but you also have to consider how much effort, how much investment does this take, all of those things, because that will have an influence on how you prioritize as well. So a lot of times we look at this like a matrix of how much impact will this have on our goals and the customer experience, and how much investment do we have to put into it. And then you can find those quick wins really quickly, and then you can decide, okay, are those longer term things worth investing in, and start a project plan around those. And finally, this is all about action. I have seen so many journey maps that turn into relics. They turn into something that people say, yeah, wasn't that great? We learned all about all the ways that our customers are frustrated, and then we did nothing about it. That is the worst outcome. Make sure that this is, again, a tool. It's a living document. It's something that you are using to really say to your leadership, to say to your cross-functional teams, we care about the customer so much that we are investing in understanding their point of view and then doing something about it. So if you have that cross-functional leadership team, which I hope you do, then you can look at your journey map and say, okay, what are we doing about this? Who's taking this on? Who's accountable? Make it a real thing, and then come back and see if it actually improved the journey for your customers. So that's when it becomes this powerful cycle. In some organizations, especially large ones, you need governance around this. You need to have a committee who will really understand, what does this mean for our organization? What are the rules here? What are some of the best practices? How are we going to make sure that it's not just, becoming a long list of improvements that we're never going to get to? That is part of this as well. So make sure you have some sort of plan for that going forward as well, because otherwise it can become a little bit frustrating when you're finding all of these things and then nothing is happening to change them on behalf of your customers. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful to you. If so, make sure to subscribe. We do these webinars every Friday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn Live and right here on YouTube. And if you've got a question, don't be shy. Ask in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer. You're here for your customers. I'm here for you.